In a hunter-gatherer band, it was apparently taboo to tell another person what to do, not frowned upon. Taboo, no boss, no orders, no one who could command someone else to go somewhere or do anything. This wasn't chaos. It was a remarkably stable social structure, and it's one of 10 rules your ancestors followed automatically that modern life has made almost impossible to follow. These rules were never written down. They weren't enforced by courts, police, or governments. They were enforced by something far older, the group itself. Most of them are gone now, not because people deliberately abandoned them, but because the world changed around them. These are 10 rules found in different forms across independent hunter-gatherer cultures. They weren't universal laws, and they weren't identical everywhere, but they repeatedly solved the same problems: hunger, inequality, conflict, knowledge, cooperation, and the distribution of power. And almost none of them survive intact today. Rule 1. Whatever you kill, everyone eats. A hunter returns to camp. He's been gone since before dawn. He tracked a wildebeest across open ground for 6 hours, brought it down, and hauled it back in the afternoon heat. He's exhausted, dehydrated, and hungry. He does not eat first. The meat is distributed among the members of the band: the sick, the elderly, the children who contributed nothing to the hunt, the women who gathered while the men were away. The hunter gets his share, just like everyone else. Not a larger portion because he made the kill. The same. This wasn't simply generosity, it was the rule. Marshall Solins, one of the most influential anthropologists of the 20th century, documented what he called the anti-surplus principle across hunter-gatherer societies. Accumulating food beyond immediate needs wasn't just discouraged. In many groups, it was socially unacceptable. James Woodburn, who spent decades studying the Hadza of Tanzania, described what he called an immediate return economy. Food obtained one day was consumed that day or the next. Storage was limited. Sharing was the default. The reason wasn't necessarily altruism, it was insurance. In a world without refrigeration, agriculture, or any reliable way to predict tomorrow's food supply, the only storage system that worked was other people. You shared your kill today because someone else might feed you tomorrow. Hoarding threatened that arrangement, and this idea didn't stop with food. Rule 2. Own nothing you cannot carry. Across mobile hunter-gatherer societies, accumulating large amounts of physical property was difficult for the same basic reason: the group had to move. A band following game, water, and seasonal resources couldn't afford to drag a lifetime of possessions behind it. Someone who accumulated furniture, stores of material, or more tools than they could carry became a liability. They slowed the group down. So material inequality had a natural limit. You owned what you wore and what you carried. So did everyone else. The gap between the richest and poorest person in the band could be the difference between a slightly better spear and a slightly worse one. Agriculture changed the equation. Once you could store grain across seasons, you could accumulate across years. And once you could accumulate across years, inequality had a mechanism. Food was the first thing the group prevented people from accumulating. Possessions were the next, but there was something harder to measure and potentially more dangerous: status. Rule 3. The moment anyone tries to rise above the group, bring them back down. A hunter makes 3 exceptional kills in 1 week. He starts carrying himself differently. He talks more during evening discussions. He begins implying that his opinion deserves more weight. The group responds. Not necessarily with violence, with mockery. Richard Lee documented among the Kungsana practice observed in different forms across hunter-gatherer societies. When a hunter returned with a large kill, the group might respond not with praise but criticism. The meat was described as small, thin, barely worth the effort. You call this a kill? I seen better from a boy with his first spear. Lee called it insulting the meat. Christopher Boehm described this broader pattern as part of a reverse dominance hierarchy. The use of ridicule, gossip, disobedience, and, in extreme cases, ostracism or execution to stop an individual from accumulating power. The hunter wasn't supposed to turn success into superiority. The correct response was humility. Downplay the achievement. Acknowledge the role of luck. The point wasn't to punish someone for being good at hunting. It was to make sure being good at hunting didn't turn into being above everyone else. And that leads directly to the next rule. Rule 4. No one gives orders. Ever. In hunter-gatherer bands, it was apparently taboo to tell another person what to do. Peter Gray, in his research on hunter-gatherer social organization, documented decisions being made through extended discussions aimed at consensus. Every adult voice could carry weight, and no individual simply had the authority to command the others. There could be respected hunters, skilled trackers, experienced elders, but respect wasn't the same as authority. A skilled hunter could suggest where the group should hunt tomorrow. He couldn't order everyone to go there. If someone strongly disagreed with the group's decision, one option was to leave and join another band. Not overrule, not impose, leave. Now the first 4 rules fit together. You couldn't accumulate too much food, you couldn't accumulate too many possessions, you couldn't accumulate too much status, and you couldn't turn status into authority. Modern society is built around almost the opposite arrangement. Workplaces have hierarchies. Governments make decisions that bind millions of people. Schools put adults in positions of authority over children. Large organizations depend on people being able to give orders and others being required to follow them. A hunter-gatherer band was small enough that cooperation depended on preventing one person from becoming the person everyone else had to obey. But equality wasn't the only thing these societies were protecting. They also had to make sure that when something was taken from the environment, as little of it as possible was wasted. Rule 5. Waste nothing that once lived. When a hunter-gatherer group made a kill, very little was left behind. The meat was eaten, bones were cracked for marrow and boiled for broth. The hide became clothing or shelter material. The sinew became binding and bowstrings. The stomach could become a container. The bladder a water vessel. Fat could be rendered and preserved. Teeth and claws could become tools or ornaments. The organs were often eaten first. This wasn't necessarily reverence, it was practical. In a world where the next meal was never guaranteed, throwing away something usable meant abandoning a survival opportunity. Across cultures as geographically distant as the Inuit of the Arctic and the San of the Kalahari, the same principle appeared. If an animal died to feed you, you used as much of it as possible. A modern chicken processing facility discards approximately 30% of the bird. Parts that are economically inefficient to process at scale. Grocery stores throw away produce that doesn't meet cosmetic standards. The average American household wastes roughly a pound of food per day. The underlying rule was simple: nothing that costs a life should cost it for nothing. Rule 6. Children learn by watching, not by being taught. The same group that had no formal hierarchy also had no formal classroom. David Lancy, an anthropologist who has spent decades studying childhood across cultures, found that in hunter-gatherer societies, adults generally didn't teach children through structured lessons. Children learned by watching. They positioned themselves around adult activities, butchering, tool making, plant identification, fire building, and observed. They weren't constantly instructed or corrected. When they tried to reproduce what they'd seen, the result provided the feedback. A child who wanted to learn how to knap flint might watch a skilled napper for hours, days, or weeks. Then they'd pick up a stone and try. The edge either worked or it didn't. The learning was immediate, physical, and connected to something real. Children weren't separated from the adult world and prepared for it later. They participated in it. And that matters because the system depended on something else, making sure knowledge didn't disappear when one generation died. Rule 7. The old carry the knowledge. Treat them accordingly. Without writing, books, or recorded media, knowledge lived inside people. Where to find water during a drought. Which plants were poisonous. How to treat a particular wound. Which mountain pass could be crossed in winter. All of it existed in memory, and much of that memory belonged to the oldest people. An elder wasn't simply someone who had stopped working. They were part of the group's archive, its accumulated survival knowledge. Their death could mean losing information that nobody else had learned. Kim Hill's research on the Ake of Paraguay found that older post-reproductive individuals, especially grandmothers, contributed to the survival of grandchildren through food provisioning, childcare, and knowledge transmission. This is part of the reasoning behind what researchers call the grandmother hypothesis. The idea that human longevity may have been favored partly because older people continue to provide important benefits to their descendants. Modern society often separates elderly people from everyday intergenerational life. There are roughly 1.5 million Americans in nursing homes. Your ancestors would have had a very different concept of an elder. Someone who couldn't travel as easily could still remember, still talk, still teach. The body might become less useful to the group. The knowledge inside it didn't have to. Rule 8. Live with strangers, not just your family. You might expect people in a dangerous world without legal protection to stay close to their relatives, parents, siblings, cousins. They didn't necessarily. Mark Dibble of UCL, publishing in Science in 2015, led a 2-year study of hunter-gatherer groups in Congo and the Philippines. His team collected genealogical data on hundreds of individuals and found that average relatedness within the bands was surprisingly low. People weren't primarily living with their closest relatives. His explanation was straightforward. If everyone tries to live with as many relatives as possible, those relatives are doing the same thing with their own relatives. The result isn't a group made entirely of close kin. It's a mixture of related and unrelated people. That changes the survival network. Your children aren't surrounded only by people who share your genes. They're surrounded by people with different skills, knowledge, relationships, and resources. Cooperation spreads beyond the family. Modern humans often organize themselves in the opposite direction, by income, age, politics, neighborhood, and social identity. The more comfortable our environment becomes, the easier it is to surround ourselves with people who are already similar to us. For hunter-gatherers, living with unrelated people wasn't a luxury, it was part of the survival system, and when that system broke down badly enough, even punishment worked differently. Rule 9. Punishment belongs to everyone, or it belongs to no one. Christopher Boehm's research on prehistoric capital punishment found a pattern in the hunter-gatherer societies he studied. When someone committed an offense serious enough to warrant death, persistent attempts at domination, serial violence, dangerous sorcery, the killing could be carried out collectively. Everyone participated, no single person was the executioner. The reason was practical. If one person killed the offender, that person could become the target of revenge from the offender's relatives. Then someone might take revenge on them. Then someone else would retaliate again. In a small group, that cycle could destroy the community. But if everyone participated, there was no single killer to take revenge against. The act belonged to the community. That system makes much more sense when you remember the earlier rules. The group had spent enormous effort preventing individuals from accumulating power. It also couldn't afford to let punishment create a new source of individual power or a cycle of private revenge. Modern justice works differently because modern societies are different. Individual judges hand down sentences. Individual police officers make arrests. Legal violence is assigned to specific institutions and people. A band of 30 people could act collectively. A city of millions can't. When the band became a village, the village became a city, and the city became a civilization. Institutions had to replace direct group enforcement, and that changed the nature of justice. Rule 10. You are not an adult until you have proven you can contribute. Among the Kung San of the Kalahari, a young man was not permitted to marry until he had killed his first large game animal and undergone a ritual called the rite of first kill. His father or another senior kinsman scarified him, making deliberate cuts in his skin, with fat from the killed animal worked into the wounds. The ritual was public. It marked a transition from someone the group supported to someone capable of supporting the group. Until then, no matter his age, he wasn't considered a full adult in the social sense. He hadn't yet demonstrated the contribution expected of him. Across hunter-gatherer societies, the details varied, but the broader principle could be similar. Adulthood wasn't simply a number. It was demonstrated through participation and responsibility. Girls underwent parallel rituals. Among the Kung, a girl's first menstruation was marked by ceremony and specific obligations, acknowledging a transition toward adult responsibilities. The group had supported you through childhood. Then, at a publicly recognized point, the expectation reversed. Now, you would begin supporting it. Modern adulthood arrives at a fixed age set by government. 18 in most countries, 21 for some activities. The number doesn't measure competence, readiness, or contribution. A teenager who has developed genuine skills and contributes meaningfully to their family becomes an adult on the same legal day as someone who is completely unprepared. Your ancestors would not have recognized adulthood as a birthday. In their world, becoming an adult meant demonstrating that the group could depend on you. 10 rules. But they're not really 10 unrelated rules. Look at what they're doing. The first 4 limit what one person can accumulate: food, possessions, status, authority. The next 3 protect the group's resources and knowledge, use what you have, let children participate, and keep elders connected to the community. The 8th expands cooperation beyond family. The 9th protects the group from revenge and domination when someone crosses the line. And the 10th closes the loop. The group supports you when you're helpless. Then, eventually, you become someone who supports the group. None of this required a philosopher to invent a system or a king to decree one. These were practical responses to recurring problems: hunger, inequality, conflict, knowledge, cooperation, and power. Your ancestors didn't follow these rules because they were morally superior to us. They followed them because breaking them made survival harder. That's the part that's easy to miss. The problems haven't disappeared. We've just built completely different systems around them. Loneliness, inequality, the feeling that no one is listening, the sense that wisdom dies with the people who carry it, the feeling that you became an adult before you were ready. You can't simply recreate a hunter-gatherer band in the modern world. There are billions of us. We have cities, institutions, markets, technology, and laws that solve problems a small band never had to face. But some of the problems those 10 rules were designed to handle are still here. They just have different names now. And maybe that's the strangest part. Your ancestors couldn't have imagined the questions we'd eventually ask. But they spent almost the entire history of our species working out ways to live with one another anyway.